Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Phil Ponce, and thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight,
nobody support them, so somebody has to start and do something about it.
volunteers are stepping up to protect street vendors in Little Village. Safety and travel concerns after recent cartel violence in Mexico. New guidelines for protecting immigrants who have labor complaints. We hear from Arise Chicago on how the process works. A free job training program through the YWCA helps open doors to careers in the construction and utilities industries.
We're here to put the game away. You don't have to worry about the pieces.
And a tropically tinged cafe gets Puerto Rican culture and hospitality into the game.
Art is responding to life.
And muralist Pablo Serrano on how public art makes its home in Chicago. All that coming up at our first story tonight, addressing concerns around violence in the U.S.'s neighbor to the south, and that's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
The arrest earlier this month of the son of notorious Mexican drug lord El Chapo sparked violence in the northern Mexican city of Culiacan. The U.S. State Department has put much of the country under a travel advisory, including an advisory not to travel to the state of Sinaloa due to crime and kidnappings. Sinaloa is where Culiacan is located. Joining us now with more are Guillermo Sanhueza. He's an associate professor in the School of Social Work at Loyola University of Chicago. And Oscar Chacon, he's executive director of Alianza Americas. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. And Oscar Chacon, if I could begin with you, give us a brief summary of what's behind the recent cartel violence in Mexico.
Well, what's important to understand is that violence is actually the ghost that continues to haunt Mexico in many ways. I mean, the incidents that erupted in Sinaloa following the arrest of the son of Chapo Guzman, it's only the most visible episode, but in reality, Mexico continued to experience a significant number of murders, disappearances, and just outright extortion that affects hundreds of thousands of people in Mexico. So what we saw in Sinaloa should not be misunderstood as an anomaly, but rather as part of a pattern that continues to haunt basically public office at all levels in Mexico.
And Guillermo Sanhueza, basic question, why should people in the United States, why should people in Chicago care about violence in Mexico?
I mean, I totally agree with Oscar in the sense that violence has social roots, and in a global world, everything is interconnected. Every country is interconnected in some way to one another. And what happens in Mexico, what may happen in Nicaragua, what is going on in Venezuela, it will have repercussions in the U.S. in a different levels. I would mention three possible paths. First of all, of course, is migration flux. As a result of people escaping from violence, that's an expected outcome, not something that is desirable, but something that one may expect. Secondly, I would mention a possible intensification of violence. Let's recall that gangs and drug cartels usually are in competition with one another. So once we see a decay in one of them, the other will try to go behind this big profitable business. And as a result of that, this is my third point, and this is probably more directly to what the U.S. should be thinking about and should take some actions to prevent, is the threat of corruption and the threat of increasing drug criminal activity. Again, this is very profitable business, illegal, but very profitable, and cooperation or cooptation. So drug cartels will try to keep going business to increase their presence in the States, because the States and Europe are the two most important markets for substances. So this is, yeah.
Oscar, excuse me for interrupting, but Oscar Chacon, I wanted to ask you, I wanted to pick up on something that Guillermo just mentioned. Is there a possibility that because the drug cartels are so flush with money, and it's understood that many officials in Mexico have taken bribes from the cartels, is it possible that that kind of bribery could expand into the United States with U.S. officials?
Well, some people may argue that it's already happening and that it's been happening for a while. After all, remember that we are a nation in the U.S. that has spent over $1 trillion trying to stop the flow of illegal substances, drugs. And yet, there are plenty of drugs to be bought in the U.S. A lot of people have been dying in the last few years from fentanyl. And I think that that is only the last episode of what we see. And the question that one asks is, how is it possible that if we are investing so much money trying to stop drugs continue to be available? One potential explanation is that the bribing of officials has already reached the U.S., and that is something that should concern us all.
Oscar Chacon, let me stay with you for a second. For people who've not been following the story, what is the Mexican government's strategy, their approach to dealing with the cartels?
Well, the short-term strategy has been to deploy the military every place they can. They even created a special force called the National Guard that became into place in 2019. And the fact is, even though there is so much emphasis on deploying the military, assassinations continue to happen, kidnappings continue to happen, not only of common people, but of human rights defenders as well. And that is, again, without mentioning the attacks against journalists, Mexico is considered one of the most dangerous places for journalists nowadays. And so, again, these are what the Mexican government is doing. In the long haul, I think that the real solution to this issue is going to be to find a way to make Mexico truly more prosperous for widest segments of Mexicans as possible, so that Mexico can actually root out violence, not just by deploying the army or other forms of law enforcement, but by creating real and sustainable opportunity for as many Mexicans as possible.
Along those lines, Guillermo, you have said that that there is a couple of areas that is not covered in the news about violence in Mexico. What are those areas that perhaps the media are overlooking?
I would say, I was talking to a friend some hours ago. I was telling that the social causes of violence and why the cartels dominate so much the public sphere in Mexico is named gang violence. But it's really a story to me more of a failure of a state, a failure of Mexico in dealing with corruption, in dealing with effective presence of a state or lack of presence of the state for many poor people. It's a very, El Chapo or what used to be Pablo Escobar in Colombia. Many of these guys are celebrities, are semi-gods in their towns. People look for them for help, for assistance, and that role should be the state, the municipality, and that's not happening, at least effectively. And that's
we're looking at video of El Chapo right now, and Guillermo, you've been quoted as saying, for the reasons you're talking about, that a lot of people in Mexico, a lot of poor people look up to El Chapo. But Oscar Chacon, real quickly, we've been talking about cartel violence. So many Chicagoans, so many Americans travel to vacation in Mexico. Mexico gets 35 million tourists a year. How safe is it for tourists in Mexico, would you say?
Generally speaking, places that are commonly visited by tourists have not necessarily experienced the kind of violence that we are talking about. This may change at any moment because sadly, some of those commonly visited places by tourists are also places where drugs move, and that may also cause, some potential disruption in the future. So far, it's been relatively safe. Mexico City is very much a safe haven in as far as violence. But the fact is, again, the danger of this type of violence spreading is real and should be kept an eye on.
And that is where we'll have to leave it. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Our thanks to Guillermo Sanhueza and Oscar Chacon. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you.
And up next, local street vendors calling for help. Joanna Hernandez has the story right after this. Street vendors in Little Village are pleading for help after an increase in robberies. Joanna Hernandez tells us how volunteers are coming in to help. Joanna, how long has this been going on?
Phil, we know this has been going on since November of last year, and they've rallied in front of the police headquarters asking for more police presence in the early morning, especially in those early 4 a.m. hours when they're out selling tamales. Now, as they wait to hear from the city, volunteers are coming together to watch over those vendors.
Street vendors say they are being tormented.
Ya tengo como 13 años vendiendo aquí y nunca nos había pasado esto.
Last week, Margarita Meneses says she was robbed at gunpoint by a group of men.
Me puse como que era así como yo, ¿qué hago, no? Pero pues ya pues les di lo que tenía yo y...
When Angel Valdez heard the Little Village Community Council was looking for volunteers to watch over the vendors, he signed up.
It's amazing how brave they are, you know, because even this happened yesterday, you see them here the next day. That's because they need to provide, just like all of us.
Valdez is a member of the Brown Berets, a national Chicano organization aimed at protecting neighborhoods like Little Village.
To me, it was very important because I know they're very vulnerable. You know, there's people that come from Mexico, from Latin America, and, you know, nobody support them. We have eloteros now, and fruit vendors.
The Brown Beret members take turns with other volunteers, driving around and checking in on the vendors throughout the morning.
We just create a WhatsApp group, and all of them are in it, and, you know, they say, guys, be careful.
Along 26th Street, we spoke with Maria Velázquez, a street vendor who says she was robbed multiple times last year.
Caminan, pasan y están un rato con nosotros. En los ratos que estamos más solos, ellos están pendientes, o si no, ellos dicen, aquí estoy en la esquina, estoy más adelante. Y ya nos sentimos, yo me siento en lo particular más tranquila.
But vendors like Velázquez are looking for a plan of action from the city.
Nos dé a nosotros también una respuesta de cómo vamos a continuar. Pero también estamos pidiendo a la alcaldesa que les dé recursos, porque si ellos no les dan recursos a la policía, si no les da recursos, pues la policía va a hacer lo que puede, lo que está a su alcance.
Valdez, who also lives in Little Village, says hiring security is an option.
My opinion is more like to put a group of workers of food doing their full time and get paid. And not by the vendors, by the resources that the city has.
The area's alderman, Byron Cicho Lopez, says the city has the funds to establish a viable solution to protect street vendors.
The city of Chicago just approved one of the largest budgets in the city of Chicago, $16.4 billion. We know also in the latest report that just as little as 10% of the money is being distributed. We need to make sure that those funds are out there to serve our community.
In the meantime, Valdez says they will be out as much as they can to support the vendors.
We're trying to make our voices to be heard, so the mayor and whoever needs to do something about it, they do it. And again, use their resources that they need to be used for this type of things.
We're told the vendors and the Little Village Community Council will be meeting with the Chicago Police Department's 10th district for their second meeting at the end of the month. And Phil, they're hoping the CPD has a clear strategy by then.
Joanna, has Mayor Lightfoot weighed in on any possible plan of action?
Well, Phil, in this week's mayoral debate on ABC 7, Mayor Lightfoot did mention that a possible solution would be for vendors to go cashless. But the vendors that I spoke with say that's not a sustainable solution in the long run. Plus, that doesn't stop from customers being robbed as well.
Joanna, thank you very much. And up next, new protections for those filing labor complaints. We explain right after this. This week, the Department of Homeland Security issued official guidelines for protecting undocumented workers who experience or witness workplace violations. The policy allows undocumented workers to make complaints about labor violations and to participate in investigations without fear of immigration-related retaliation. Arise Chicago explains how workers who want to file complaints can find resources to help.
Every worker, it doesn't matter citizen or undocumented, is obviously afraid to file complaints against the employer because they can lose their job. But an undocumented worker fears that besides losing your job, immigration is going to come after you, the employer is going to call immigration, you're going to get deported, you're going to get separated from your family, etc. So we call this the policy against fear. You know, undocumented workers should not fear anymore. They should come forward and file complaints. The steps to participate in this new policy are: one, identify your violation. Identify what is the employer violating. It's not the same thing to violate the Fair Wage Act than to violate the ADA, etc. So first, identify it. Go to a worker center, come to our worker center, identify your labor problem. The immigration part is going to come later. For the immigration part, you're going to have to gather all your documents, identification, your income, proof of your relationship to the company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to follow up on the two tracks. Participating in the investigation, you know, render testimony with the National Labor Relations Board, with OSHA, or any government agency you file the complaint with, and then go through the immigration process. Don't try starting by going to an immigration attorney because they don't know about labor laws. You know, this is a labor issue. This is not an immigration issue. So go to the experts on labor issues, worker centers.
And you'll find more on these new guidelines on our website. If you've ever considered a career in the construction or utilities trades but aren't sure how to get started, a new program is offering a way to get your foot in the door. YWCA, that is Metropolitan Chicago, is now accepting applications for this year's 11-week Construct Infrastructure Academy, which pays its trainees to learn the basics of those trades.
The Construct program is an 11-week, life-changing job training program that offers a unique curriculum designed to provide information, guidance, and support to women and minorities interested in entering entry-level construction and utility-related careers. We have found that people just didn't know how to get into the utility and construction field. So yes, this definitely provided that opportunity and bridge a gap for those who just didn't have the information, the tools, the resources, the guidance of how to work for these big major utility companies and their diversity partners. Construct was really designed to build a stronger and more diverse workforce in the construction and related industries in the state of Illinois. It also provides a way to reduce the gap for those who reside in underserved and underdeveloped communities. We've really seen our participants go from surviving to thriving. Their lives have been transformed. Classes start February 6th. So in order to apply, we need you to put in an application by Friday, January 27th. Eligible participants just need to be unemployed, 18 years or older, men and women. Please, women, come apply. Make sure they have a high school diploma, valid driver's license, and be committed to attending an 11-week training session. That's really all we ask for.
And you'll find more on how to apply on our website. From apples to Yahtzee, just about everyone likes playing games. But the face of the board game industry is often white and male. Now a local couple is hoping they can change the game. Board game enthusiasts and entrepreneurs Yesenia and Jose Maldonado are rolling the dice that game lovers of all stripes will want to stay and play at their new cafe. Producer Erica Gunderson gets us started.
On a lively Friday evening at the Stay and Play Game Cafe, the tabletops are busy with block stacking, card flipping, and battleship sinking. Owners Yesenia and Jose Maldonado say tabletop games, like the hundreds of games they have stocked for patrons to play, are one of the 3 great loves they hope to share with their new business.
First and foremost, we want to represent those 3 pieces: our Puerto Rican heritage, our love, affinity for Chicago, and our passion for board games and how it brings community together.
The Maldonados hosted game nights for years before taking the leap and converting a former bar into a bright, tropically tinged haven for gameplay.
Literally a decade ago, we were hosting game night, and it was just a phenomenal event. We left that night, and I went to Yesenia. I'm like, we got to take this to a larger scale, give it to the neighborhood.
The cafe serves up classic Puerto Rican finger foods like tostones, maduros, and of course, the Chicago Boricua classic, jibarito.
I always say that our people are everywhere. I think our cuisine is so accessible and it's delicious, and so I want to make it accessible and delicious.
We get some comments about, like, why don't we have arroz con gandules, mofongo, and stuff like that. And while we love eating that food, and we like cooking it too, I look at the game boxes and said, I do not want to be going through them and finding little gandules here and there. I mean, those are not game pieces.
They also offer a rum-focused cocktail menu to add a little spirit to your gameplay, something their mascot, named Hebe, would approve of.
Hebe. So he's named after Jibaro. So the Spanish word for people who live in the country in Puerto Rico. So we designed a meeple and made him a Jibaro, and we named him Hebe. And Hebe doing a bunch of things. Hebe playing.
Yeah, he'd be playing board games, he'd be eating food, he'd be drinking cocktails.
He'd be doing everything.
Yeah.
While the concept of a game cafe isn't entirely new, the Maldonados say their vision is of a place that is welcoming to everyone, from friends to families, and offers culture and connection alongside Clue and Connect 4.
We strive to actually build community, so we are no strangers to saying, you've got a party of two, there's a party of three that's taking up a big table. Let's go ask them, can we join the tables? And this really warms our heart. Mm-hmm. They join forces and play a game together. So complete strangers playing together is absolutely what we want to do.
And so far, the cafe seems to be getting high scores across the board from its clientele.
It's like a home vibe, so I'm Puerto Rican and it just already makes me feel like I'm at home. Chicago lacks that, it really does. There's a lot of bars, there's a lot of lounges, but there aren't any places like this where you could just hang out. Like you can have your café con leche and you can play a game.
I love the Maduros. I've only had sweet plantains like one other time in my life and I remember loving them, so it brought me back to that.
We are definitely like a game family, like we have family nights. I think that the fact that they have like over 600 games to play, like 2-player games, 3-player games, everybody can play. They have the simplest games, old school games is perfect.
If you're in the mood for an epic capitalist throwdown or 4 hours of battling dragons, the Maldonados say they're staying true to their name.
We say stay and play, take as many games as you like. You can come here, play our games, have fun, eat our food, and then go home and not have to clean and wash the dish.
For Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And the Stay and Play Game Cafe has taken its place in the West Irving Park neighborhood, and you can find more on our website. Pablo Serrano is one of Chicago's most prolific muralists. In 2022, he completed 4 towering artworks all over the city. We recently met up with Serrano at a 2-sided mural on a real estate office in West Elsden, where he talked about what making a home for public art in Chicago can do for its people. Here's another look.
Art is responding to life and to the things that we're going through, and fundamental questions that go to where have we been, where are we at, where are we going? Muralism and public art here in Chicago has the same obligation and the opportunity to create a Chicago identity, right? Who are we? Where have we been? Where are we going, right? What's the challenge? What are we all responding to? This is Su Familia Real Estate, owned by the Flores family, that just recently celebrated 25 years. And this mural was commissioned to celebrate that history. The title of it is Hope, the Journey Together Towards the Future. It features a couple of different elements that are central to what I think is a shared goal of home when you establish home. Right, whether it's your apartment or you buy your first home, that you're thinking about your kids, you're thinking about your family, you're thinking about your community, your neighbors, the city, and that this is where you're gonna be. Not just be, but you're raising your family and you're engaged, you're part of this. I'm blessed to grow up in Pilsen that has this amazing, rich, cultural history of public art, right? Artists like Marco Raya, Hector Duarte, Romero, Castillo, all of these giants that paved the way for this ongoing conversation that's happening about Mexican-American identity, right? In relationship to American identity. right, as a whole. But what's important to understand is that they're standing on the shoulders of other muralists, other artists, and it's this long continuity. Chicago's challenge is transcending the borders that are in our city, right, and connecting what is disconnected. I think public art can be of tremendous service to that.
Serrano says he's building a new studio space in Pilsen to offer classes and mentorship. More details on that on our website. And that is our show for this weekend. If you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And join Brandis Friedman and Parashutz next week on Chicago Tonight at a brand new time, 10 p.m. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Phil Ponce, and I thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.